Alright, you absolute goobs. You know what time of the year it is. We're getting there. We're getting there to Christmas. It's coming. It's coming. I'm going to let y'all in on a little bit of my Skinwalker Tapes research. Tomorrow night, we're doing Skinwalker Tapes Christmas edition. 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find it on my Facebook, which is Yaktus Jack currently. You can find it on my Twitter, at Yakov Radomski. You can find it on YouTube, Skinwalker Tapes Archive. But right now, I'm going to read this thing to you. I haven't read it yet. It is a PDF entitled, When Santa Was a Mushroom, Amanita Muscaria and the Origins of Christmas. Just something I stumbled across in my journeys around the web, the Webernet. It is, looks like it's originally from Rents.com. So I'm gonna read this to you guys. We're gonna learn a little bit together, and maybe I'm gonna probably save any commentary I have till tomorrow for the episode. So give you something to tune into. Let's get started. When Santa Was a Mushroom, Amanita Muscaria and the Origins of Christmas. A couple of years ago, I was home on break from university, going through a book of old Christmas carols my family sings every year. On a whim, I stopped at a carol we normally skipped, but whose melody I had always liked. The Holly and the Ivy. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. Our family Christmas celebrations generally have little to do with the Christian spin on the holiday. In past years, we'd skipped singing The Holly and the Ivy because its verses have a distinctly religious cast. As an adult, I realized that those Christian verses were probably added on much later, masking the verses where the ivy was celebrated in soft counterpart to the bristly holly. I rewrote the song in true pagan fashion, and it's been part of our Christmas canon ever since. Yet that insight got me thinking, how many seemingly Christian elements of Christmas actually mask pagan or shamanic traditions that are much older? The idea that Christmas has been grafted onto much older shamanic beliefs is not a new idea, of course. Other scholars have pointed out the parallels between our Christmas feasts, gift-giving, and sexual permissiveness. Just look at the modern Christmas office party. And older traditions, such as the pagan Feast of Saturnalia. In this article, I would like to advance a newer synthesis between traditional European shamanism and the Christmas holiday as it is celebrated today. Mostly without knowing it, Westerners still celebrate Christmas using symbols that have shamanic significance. None more so than the humble Amanita mushroom, a psychoactive fungus that may be rooted in the very origins of Christmas itself. Here we see an old Christmas card featuring the gifting of Amanita muscaria mushrooms. Amanita is a genus of mushroom native to temperate regions of Europe and North America, as far south as Florida and as far north as Siberia and eastern Russia. The Amanita genus is one of the most widespread in the world, with species that range from edible to deadly poisonous. Two species, Amanita muscaria and Amanita pantherina, contain muscimol and ibotenic acid. I'm assuming I'm saying this all wrong. They contain muscimol and ibotenic acid and are known to be psychoactive. Amanita mushrooms grow in association with the roots of pine, birch, and sometimes oak trees, and would have been widespread in Europe and Russia. The effects of eating dry or fresh psychoactive Amanita mushrooms include euphoria, a sense of inebriation, impaired balance, and increased clarity of thought. Negative effects such as chills, sweating, salivation, nausea, and vomiting can also manifest, and are more likely to occur when amanitas are eaten fresh. Drying or boiling Amanita mushrooms converts the reactive ibotenic acid to muscimol, and may boil off the muscarine that is thought to be at the root of these negative effects. The epicenter of traditional Amanita use has been in Siberia, a part of eastern Russia thousands of miles from Moscow, and as different from European Russia as colonial India was from the British Isles. Siberia was host to dozens of distinct ethnic groups, many of whom have retained their identities and shamanic practices into the present day. Siberian shamans, or medicine people, are individuals who serve the community by contacting the spirit realm in order to heal illness or divine the future. Sometimes, a shaman ingests dried amanitas as a means of access to these realms. However, many shamans have told ethnographers that they themselves are too powerful to need amanitas and entered the spirit realms through methods such as drumming or ecstatic chanting alone. Furthermore, it wasn't just Siberian shamans who used amanitas during the long Arctic winters. A closer look at the literature reveals that amanitas may have been more heavily used by lay people than by shamans. Numerous Russian travelogues describe amanita mushrooms being passed out as a libation at celebrations held by high-ranking Siberian tribespeople, just as alcoholic drinks are consumed in the West. At low doses, amanita mushrooms can produce a sensation of warmth and increased energy, similar to a moderate dose of alcohol, but more stimulating. It's logical to suppose that in Siberia, they might have been eaten recreationally to brighten spirits during the dark winter. This is the woods at dusk near Tyumen, western Siberia. The sun would have stayed near or below the horizon for weeks during the Siberian winters. Ordinary Siberians may also have used amanitas to ward off or combat winter-related conditions such as vitamin D deficiency, depression, and lack of energy brought on by seasonal affective disorder. Edible species, such as oyster mushrooms, are a little known but important source of vitamin D, which is essential for maintaining a level mood and bolstering energy levels. It is not far-fetched to suppose that amanita mushrooms would have been an important source of vitamin D for Siberians during the sunless months of winter. Ethnographic evidence also suggests that Siberian laborers would take a small amount of amanita mushrooms before beginning physical work to take advantage of the burst of energy and mild euphoria produced at that low dose. This practice is similar to the way kratom leaves are boofed by Thai laborers and underscores the practical functions that amanita mushrooms likely carried for ordinary Siberians. Amanita mushrooms, the original Christmas gift? Though amanita mushrooms had a recognized recreational and practical value in Siberia, the connection between the red and white toadstool and the Christmas holiday is less clear. What can the local practices of tribes in Siberia tell us about why we exchange gifts around the solstice time, stash them under pine trees decorated with red and white ornaments, which are sometimes even in the shape of amanitas, and sing songs about flying reindeer? I see Jack Hoffman in the chat. Shrooms are a hell of a drug. They are. Amanitas are not exactly the mushrooms that people think of when thinking about psychedelic mushrooms, though. It's actually a totally different chemical. The recreational mushrooms that are at the Dead Show or whatever, they're all psilocybin, however the fuck you say that. Yeah, this is a totally different compound. I guess it's the muscimol is what I read that's doing it. It's not supposed to be a particularly good time. I don't know. Jack Hoffman clarifies, for legal purposes, I don't advocate for illegal drug use. I personally don't give a flying fuck what anybody puts in their body. Not even a little bit. Katie says, boofing amanitas are a new tradition for me. Well, Merry fucking Christmas. 'Tis the season. Let's do this. Traditions often have a living quality about them. They evolve out of original forms to the point where we forget why we perform them in the ways we do. Most people can agree that Christmas is celebrated on December 25th because this date is close to the winter solstice, the shortest and darkest day of the year. This must have been a momentous time of the year for people living in far northern climes. Around the Arctic Circle, the sun would have completely disappeared, plunging the world in darkness. In European pagan societies that used a lunar calendar, the winter solstice marked the end of the old year and ushered in Yule, a twilight time that was neither the old year nor the new. During this time, the boundaries between the earthly and spirit realms were thin. Even in a supposedly modern, reason-based society, we still hold festivities to mark this time of transition before the new year. Deep winter would also have been a time of physical and perhaps spiritual hardship for people in northern latitudes due to the lack of sunlight. chief among the duties of the Siberian shamans was making the rounds to the tents of Siberian tribespeople and handing out gifts of dried amanita mushrooms. A dose of warming, energizing, and euphoric amanitas may have been the best gift at that time that any Siberian native could ask for. As discussed, fresh amanitas can induce nausea, vomiting, and other unpleasant effects that can be avoided by drying the mushrooms. Siberian shamans gathering wild amanitas may have placed crops on tree branches, strung them on strings, or placed them in wet stockings, hung before the fire to dry. The parallels are unmistakable between these amanita drying practices and surviving Christmas traditions, such as hanging ornaments and garlands on trees and stockings before fireplaces. Furthermore, when visiting people's homes to perform healing services, shamans would often climb through the smoke hole of the tent, sometimes with a sack of amanitas or other entheogenic plants to administer to the sick. Dude just fucking climbs in. But that fire's roaring too, Jesus. I don't know about that, bro. Over time, the gift of health, energy, and elevated mood provided by the amanita mushroom may have morphed into a general myth of a figure who brought presents into the home at solstice time. Long before American poet Clement Clarke Moore wrote about Saint Nick coming down the chimney with a sack full of presents, a much older myth tells of a visiting goddess or shamaness who descends the chimney or smoke hole and places presents in stockings. This tale was known throughout northern Europe from England to Russia in medieval times. Vacuum Decay says, psilocybin is soluble in ethanol, so you can use it to make crystals. 4chan told me a way to make crystals. There's something bleach, something, I don't remember. It's not important. Was Santa Claus a shaman? I hope the research above has led some of our readers to consider this possibility. We do know that the concept of Santa Claus as a magical figure who visits people around solstice time is much older than the Christian Saint Nicholas. The most common version of Saint Nicholas is based on a Russian Orthodox bishop who showed extraordinary charity towards children and impoverished young women. As Christianity's influence spread throughout Europe and suppressed, but did not eliminate, the old pagan religion, the figure of Saint Nicholas was laid over top the original concept of the goddess, shamaness, or pagan deity who visited believers bearing gifts. The Christianized version of Saint Nicholas was brought to America by Dutch colonists, whose legends about the saint magically visiting houses to deposit gifts in stockings bear strong resemblance to the scenario in Siberia. Furthermore, the Dutch version of Saint Nicholas, who is usually assisted by a gnome-like dark helper, whom some scholars have speculated is the remnant of the original pagan deity associated with the solstice celebration. I guess that's Krampus, that weird motherfucker. When the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam was captured by the English and renamed New York, Dutch Christmas customs were gradually forgotten until Clement Clarke Moore revived the Santa legend in his poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas. Moore did a lot to cement the image of Santa Claus as a kindly old elf who travels the world in a single night on a sleigh pulled by flying reindeer. In creating his classic image of Santa Claus, Moore drew on the folklore of Northern European immigrants who continued to tell stories of St. Nicholas' midnight visits in his flying sleigh. The connection between Moore's poem, European folklore, and the probable shamanic origins of the Santa figure are strengthened when one looks at the illustrations of Santa Claus that Thomas Nast created for the poem. A gnome-like version of Santa Claus drawn by Thomas Nast. This squat, fur-covered, gnome-like creature bears little resemblance to the tall, lean Russian bishop whom Santa Claus is supposedly based on. He does look curiously similar to the pagan forest deity Herne/Pan, who may have been transformed into the dark helper character of the Santa myth. He also credibly resembles a diminutive, fur-clothed shaman of the sort who might have lived in pre-Christian Europe. So that Pan-Krampus connection, that's pretty solid. I like that information a lot. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I like it. The symbols that surround the Santa mythos also hint at connections to the Amanita mushroom. Santa Claus is said to place presents both in stockings and under the Christmas tree, traditionally a living pine tree. As discussed, Siberians would often place amanitas in stockings to dry before the fire. Furthermore, amanita mushrooms are symbiotic with the roots of pine trees, and sometimes oak trees. Even Santa's flying reindeer may be connected to the amanita mushroom and its effects. Reindeer have been observed foraging and eating amanita mushrooms in winter, and sometimes exhibiting drunk behavior afterward. Some scholars have speculated that Santa's flying reindeer are a covert reference to the behavior of reindeer who have ingested amanita mushrooms. It may even be that native Siberians first deduced the probable effects of amanita mushrooms by observing intoxicated reindeer. Was Jesus Christ a shaman? Today, Christmas is celebrated as the anniversary of the birth of Jesus Christ, even though most biblical scholars admit that the actual date of Christ's birth is unknown. However, in a larger sense, the story of Jesus Christ also possesses shamanic elements. In the New Testament, Christ dies, remains in a limbo between life and death for 3 days, and is reborn as an enlightened and spiritually powerful being. Literally, the Son of God revealed. This story closely parallels the classic shamanic initiation, in which a shaman in training undergoes ego death, often with the aid of entheogens, such as amanita mushrooms, travels to the spirit realms, and returns to the earthly plane as a spiritually powerful shaman. It is possible that the story of Christ's death and rebirth was written to resemble a shamanic initiation rite in order to convince reluctant natives in pre-Christian Europe to convert to Christianity. Yet, as we head into the Christmas season, it may be useful to contemplate whether the narrative reflects shamanic roots in Christianity itself, roots that have been eroded over time by religious politics and the tides of history. And that's that. References, James Arthur, Amanita muscaria, the mushrooms that shaped mankind. Arrowwood, Arrowwood's a fucking fantastic source. That was my favorite. Before I would drink cough syrup when I was a teenager, I would always go to Arrowwood, see exactly how much cough syrup I needed to drink to meet the bug people. I don't know. Andy Letcher, Shroom, A Cultural History of the Magic Mushroom. Andrew Rutijit, The Vestibule, Confessions of a Hierophant. And Tony van Rentergem, When Santa Was a Shaman. Those are the sources. Pretty good reading. I don't know. Not bad for some fucking random PDF from the internet. Vacuum Decay is telling everybody how to do things in chat. Thank you. Thank you, Vacuum. Jack says, we was Santa Claus and shit. Katie says, fun fact. Reindeer love fly agaric, which is, I guess, another term for Amanita muscaria. I guess it's the same thing. Herders and farmers will collect the urine from them and consume it. So, it's not exactly gamer girl pee, but, that'll do. Vacuum says, yeah, December 25, Sunday rest and virgin birth come from the Mithras variants. I would argue the virgin birth is from Mithras, and I would like to see the source on that. The only place I've ever heard that claimed was in Zeitgeist, and I believe that, as far as I can tell, was debunked from any primary sources. I've never seen it. You can find those Christian aspects. You can find them in other pagan cultures, but usually you'll find them 100, 150 years after Christianity already started taking hold. So I'm not sure that you can say that it was before the fact. If you have the source, I would love to see it. Please give it to me because it's fascinating. Lilburn says mushroom cult. I wish I could do a Terrence McKenna impression. That'd be fantastic. I can't do it. Jack says Arrowwood was saved in my favorites back in high school. Yeah, as is the way of the fucking high school pothead. So thanks everybody. I'm gonna end this out. I just wanted to read that real quick, and I was kind of dying to make some content. So yeah, thanks everybody in chat. I appreciate it. please fucking check out this show tomorrow. Skinwalker Tapes, Christmas edition, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Whole crew's gonna be here. It's gonna be cool. Also, I have t-shirts. Feel free to buy t-shirts. Feel free.